Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I'm Sean Butler. Bugsy Maloney's downstairs. We just went out, did the walk, did the talk, did the record, and then I come back and the audio didn't translate, didn't transition, didn't transfer from my body into this device, and then was later able to be filtered over towards you lot in YouTube. So we have to do it again. I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things you love with those you love to do them with. Guys, do me a favour, smash the like button, smash the subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topics. We got some transfer news, views and clues for you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start with a Mr. Zabarnyi from Bournemouth fame. Really interesting player. When he was 20 years old, he was clocked as the fastest defender, the fastest player in the Premier League under the age of 21, if I'm not mistaken. A tip-top defender for Bournemouth, and has demonstrated as Areola has transitioned that club from a team that was understandably a bit more reserved, a bit more pragmatic in their approach to the game at the early days of Areola's time there. And maybe didn't get the chance to necessarily demonstrate all of his kind of prowess in that regard. Similar to Lloyd Kelly. Remember him? I used to say about Lloyd Kelly, a player that fits a certain profile that in other styles of football maybe not have the chance to be able to demonstrate that. You don't really get to see. Imagine Micky Van De Ven demonstrating his speed in a Conte system. It's probably not going to happen as much, and so you look for other things. And with Zabarnyi specifically, during his time when Bournemouth were a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit more of a deeper line than they currently are, he did demonstrate that he has a wonderful ability to mark, a wonderful ability to read the game, to be able to sort of progress the ball forward within tight areas. Not at all on the ball stuff dilutes his value. He's very proficient. He's so young, so talented. And then, however, as the Bournemouth team have emerged and be able to have more time under the Areola framework, he transitioned them into a team that has more guile going forward, more zest for the attack, and more sort of risk on, should we say, approach to football. And his other assets, his speed, his pace, his ability to join the attack with the ball has also not gone unnoticed. This guy seems to have developed and grown alongside the Bournemouth team, and is in no small part down to why they are such a difficult team to beat these days. And, there's a lot you can like about Bournemouth, a lot you can like. The ownership, this is a topic right now. Daniel Levy, not everybody's cup of tea at the moment. Obviously, you know me, guys. I am someone that, first of all, likes to debate. Second of all, when I'm on a neutral channel, a channel that's not my own, I'm probably on there for the most part if there is a debate about Daniel Levy that's going to be had. And therefore, in the pursuit of playing that balance figure, because I do think it's necessary to represent both sides of the argument. And on the Levy topic, as much as some people believe that it's a closed argument, the science is settled. It isn't. There's lots of variables outside of the club's control that do influence the ability and the probability of success. And there's not that many people that are willing to put their head above the parapet and talk about them, maybe explain them. Maybe there's a lack of understanding of those things. And so that's what I do. That's why I do go in those directions. But that doesn't mean that when I'm doing my own monologues, when I have the ability to talk for 25 minutes as one, that I don't acknowledge both sides of the coin. But when you're in those environments, and a lot of people only ever see me in those environments, they are going to assume that I am 100% a Levy sympathiser and what do they call me, a lapdog, spreadsheet merchant, whatever the lovely descriptors are this week. The reality is that I, of course, acknowledge that he is, when it comes to the internal, the things you can control, serenity prayer, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. With regards to Daniel Levy, there are things that he has had the ability to control and change, and he's made mistakes. Boundless ones, a long list of mistakes, but that doesn't mean that everything is his fault. And on this channel, we shall try to explore all of the different variations and variables that do influence it. But you know what? There are other examples of chairmen out there that have a different criteria, a different set of resources, a different access to different types of talent via their multi-club ownership opportunities. And Bill Foley at Bournemouth is one such guy who has done a very, very, very smart and intelligent job of taking Bournemouth with the size of the club that they are, the size of the stand that they have, the amount of revenue they can generate from traditional means, and has figured out his own method, his own way of approaching ownership in the Premier League and what competition looks like, the difficulty of being able to compete with the guys that have more obvious access to natural fan-led revenues. And it's gone about it in a different way, similar to Brighton and Brentford. They've gone about it in a kind of youth approach and a data-led system, but have very much gone into the transfer market and use that as the primary catalyst for revenue by having an approach where you're not going to hold on to players, stand in their way, but you always make sure you have one eye on the next guy that's coming through to replace the guy that you're about to sell, but hopefully will have done well in a team that has progressed and been steady in their development on the field as well. And so Bill Foley doesn't necessarily have the same criteria, but similarly to those guys, he has approached football in a different way to how Daniel Levy has done it, and yet has found a good return so far. But that doesn't mean that he is without his detractors, and there are many. He is a multi-club ownership guy, and if you were to go to France and speak to Lorient, then you would know only too well what sort of relationship he has with certain types of fans and how he's felt, or how he is felt about, or how people feel about him, I should say, in those particular areas. Bill Foley, interesting guy, done very well. Iriola's done very well, and together they have nurtured a fantastic team that is becoming stronger and stronger in the Premier League, and they have got a lot of scouts this year. Manchester City, Arsenal and Tottenham, three of the biggest, and deserved all 3 points. And Zabarnyi is a player that I would absolutely love, but prizing him away from Bournemouth at this stage I think is difficult. January window is always the difficult window to do business in. Even when Tottenham were trying to get through 15, 20 players in their turnaround over the last 24 months, we only ever did 1 or 2 bits of business in January, so don't really expect too much more. I haven't done the numbers yet to figure out what sort of budgets I would expect is available. I will come back to you on that when the time is right. In the meantime, though, guys, what we have to factor in and figure out here is what level of influence are the factors that are outside of our control going to have over our transfer window in January. And by outside of our control, I mean, I'm not talking about Manchester City and Chelsea right now. I'm talking about injuries. Maybe you could say they are inside our control because the medical team aren't particularly good. They've got a terrible track record. Maybe you could say that some of the things that we're going through with relation to the frequency of injuries is down to Ange and the coaching staff's relentless training that, is seen as a match day level energy consumption opportunity that isn't necessary when you play 2 games a week, and is partly responsible for why we have so many injuries. What I would say, guys, is that regardless of any of those kind of semantics, we are where we are, and I don't necessarily think that there was going to be a focus on a goalkeeper this January. That wasn't part of the plan, but obviously with Vicario's injury, that's now a consideration. And how do you juggle that with the budget that's available, with the difficulty of doing the January window anyway? What about Zabarnyi? Would Tottenham have gone for another centre-back on the left that is as capable and as expensive as this guy is? I would probably argue no. I would say that Micky Van De Ven was probably going to be thought of as our number 1 pick, excuse me, and that the next guy that was going to come in was either going to be a bit part player, like a rotation guy, or he was going to be one of the youth guys that haven't yet materialised, haven't yet transitioned into, ready yet for the first team. On that note, Mr. Phillips is apparently going to be considered to be recalled from loan. There is a clause in that loan deal that allows him to be recalled for specific reasons, and I think injury crises does count as one. And so there is a chance that we might go in that direction if the decision around what do we do with our initial transfer policy, were we going to go again and look for a left winger or a winger, were we going to go for a 6? We're going to come to that sort of conversation in a second for the next story. Either way, I don't think Zabarnyi was on the list. I don't think it's going to be easy to get him in January at all. Why would Bournemouth want to sell? He's a key component in their outfit, and they've got plans this season. And in any event, if you do go in that direction, then what does that mean for your ability to fit the rest of the players that you actually had in your intended transfer policy in mind? And I would say it's a big disruptor. Like I said, I don't think we were necessarily going to go in that direction. However, Micky Van De Ven's injury, I said it at the time when he first went down against Chelsea, I said that's the last thing you want is a hamstring injury so young in a guy who relies on his pace and in a system that relies on him more so than anyone else in that back four. And unfortunately, I didn't know at the time, but he had a history of a previous hamstring injury. And once I found that out, then it was the second time in a couple of years of having a significant hamstring injury. And I feared the worst. And consequently, it looks like my fears were correct, because this is the second time this season he's out. He's out until January or February. And I fear that it's going to be an ever-present part of the Micky Van De Ven career story, that hamstrings are going to be a blight on his time on the field. And so it might make sense, therefore, to think of him as a wonderful player when he's fit, but he won't be fit enough to rely on him. And so if you are going to go again for a second competitive left-back to compete, or left-sided centre-back to compete with him, you need someone that can step in and do the job. And Ben Davies, whilst he's been fantastic this year, is obviously on the tail end of his career. Is he going to get a new contract? He probably will, if I'm honest, at this stage. But either way, even if he does or he doesn't, he's not the long term. What do we do? Is Phillips ready? Is Dorrington ready? We haven't heard much. I'm assuming no. And so I would argue that this one might be necessary. But then if we do that, does that mean that we can't go and get a replacement for Fraser Forster in case he gets injured? What do we do with that whole solution? There's a lot going on here, guys, and a lot of that stuff wasn't as part of the plan. And that you have to factor in when you're figuring out, why are you unhappy? Who's to blame? How much egg should we be throwing in that direction? How much mud should we be throwing in that direction? There's lots of things that are going on, and it's complex, as always, in football and in life. Let's move on. One of the other stories, guys, was Gomes. So I spoke to you a couple of days ago about Jonathan David of Lille fame, Canada fame, dual citizenship. It was interesting. Shout out to you, Mr. Jacob. You put out a tweet talking about Theo Hernandez and the left-sided centre-back, and the left-back rather, that is potentially going to Manchester United for 41 million euros. Unbelievable player. Now, if you want a player that can step in, step up, can compete with Destiny Udogie, give him a little bit of competition, which I think is necessary. I don't think Destiny Udogie's had a great season at all. He's nothing like the player he was last season, and he hasn't got much in the way of threat for his place. That to me is an issue. But again, how can you do it all when the window is tight? And depending on where we're at in these cups, you might need to, really look at this, Daniel Levy, and say, if we're still in all the cups by January the 1st, do we give this guy more money? Do we really back him? Are you really going to back him like all of the noise this window, this last week has been? All of the players coming out, Radu Dragusin coming out saying he has adapted because of Ange and become a better player for it. Christian Romero saying, F you, Daniel Levy, it's your fault. I love this guy. On that note, by the way, Ange came out and said that Radu was wrong to say what he said. He was passionate and he should have possibly thought about it, but he's just an emotional guy, and he was wrong, and he has apologised. Either way, Theo Hernandez, is he the guy? What I would say is he's an interesting one, isn't he? He's a brilliant player, and he can play left back, left-sided centre-back. He can cover two birds with one stone. A leader, my God, do we need it on the pitch? He has got an injury history, and I'm not sure he's necessarily, not 100% certain his style of football is the perfect fit for our version of Ange Ball. But in terms of how many boxes does he tick, he ticks most of them. He's a wonderful, wonderful player, and someone that I would love to see in a Tottenham shirt. So there's that story out there, 40 million quid, but not so much Tottenham or Manchester United, but why not get involved? Because he does, covers a lot of the areas we want. Ahead of them, though, in the midfield battle, Gomes was the name I was coming to next, and that was Jonathan David's teammate, Angel Gomes. English, plays for Lille. A wonderful talent, a little kind of pocket rocket, a midfielder that kind of can play 6, 8 or 10. Done pretty well this season. Nothing to dislike about him. Very good on the ball, can flick the ball with his outside of his feet and make it look like an inside step pass. Good footwork, great range of passing, good vision. I really like him. The problem is, I don't see where he fits in. I know that every midfielder has a little bit of a different style, a little bit of a different kind of cocktail of where their value and their approach to football is. But this idea that 6s are 8s and 8s are 10s and everyone can kind of gel together and do a bit of everything, I think it's so silly. And either I am entirely missing the trick, and I'm quite possibly missing the trick because Ange Ball is known better by Ange than he is by me. But for the love of God, the most obvious elephant in the room for me is a crying out for a 6. I've been saying it for so long, and I do not understand why we have not investigated or looked into finding that key, crucial component that can just sit in front of that back four, protect, pass, spread, play that quarterback role, and then make sure that they have that ability to intercept and adapt and adjust and protect these guys, help out the fullbacks, be able to ping it forward on the transition. It shouldn't be rocket science. I don't know why we are looking at players like Gomes who just are more 8s for a team that already have enough, already have too many, and those that we have don't really do what this system needs anyway. And I'm including Bentancur in that list, certainly Bissouma. Pape Sarr, as much as I love him, again, you look at the style of football that he is and you kind of go, I love him, I love his abilities, and he has lots of boxes that he does tick, but is he really does he really fit this system's as a kind of unique square peg, square hole? I would say no. Not that I want to sell him, I just don't think it necessarily is a glove. And that is where I have a problem with our transfer policy. Ange has said, for example, I said this to you before, guys, 18-year-olds, I'm fine with it. We need to focus on this. And at the same time tells you that the difference between the best and the next level is mentality. And he's a big proponent of mental monsters and the ability to adapt. And how can you know about those levels of strengths in a player that's 18 years old when their brain hasn't developed yet? It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. Neither does this avoidance of specificity when your system is so specific and unique to you. If you think you have this magic formula, Ange, whereby you can be the only manager that can find success playing all-out gung-ho attack regardless of the circumstance, then surely you must know that the specifics of the players within that system are unique and rare. Otherwise, more teams and more managers would do it. Yet they don't. So either the system is, and the magic formula thing is a myth, which I kind of lean into the idea that it is, or I think you're being a little bit too trusting in the qualities of the players that we have. Either way, guys, listen, Gomes for me, I don't think it's going to happen. He is a good player, but just a player that I don't think is going to be a good fit for us. Who was next on the list, guys? Let me remind myself for you. Oh, that's right, Alderete. Omar Alderete, from Paraguay, plays for Getafe, a centre-back. 10 million euros is his valuation. Look, a good player, a bit of a journeyman though. He's spent time, he's 27 years old. He's been an ever-present in the Getafe team this year. However, he has played for Hertha Berlin, Valencia, Basel, the team he came from in South America, and one other whose name escapes me. In the last 4 years, he's been on loan everywhere. Difficult to find a home. Is that a demonstration of this being a flash in the pan? Is he just a late bloomer at 27 to finally get things going? He is a good player, by the way. He's a bit of a beast, a really strong, almost looks bigger than Gleison Bremer in terms of stature and body strength. Good ability to read the game. Left-footed, which isn't exactly something that you can dismiss as valuable in the centre-half space, and maybe makes a little bit more sense if you are going to think about that. Micky Van De Ven, do you want to go a bit older, a bit more kind of leadership, a bit more resilience, but also bring him in without breaking the bank? Again, that's what I'm saying, guys. It's difficult. It's a difficult kind of a circle to square right now around how do you use whatever the budgets are, and they won't be significant. I promise you that. They won't be ridiculous. They never are in January. How do you do all of the things that you had intended to do anyway before the injuries, plus also now factor in the things you need to do to cover for the injuries without also going small? And then if you do go kind of smaller fry on players that you wouldn't otherwise have normally been interested in, do you give them 4-year contracts to get them in and then end up with more dead wood that were only ever short-term fixes? It's not beyond the realms of the reasonable possibilities to see that happening. And then you end up with short-term gain but long-term pain, which is the last thing you want in the third or final, hopefully, stage of a rebuild. And so if you don't give them the 4-year contract, then are the players going to want to come on a short-term contract when they had a good thing here anyway? And why do they care about Tottenham's problems? They care about themselves. Lots of spinning plates. Either way, Omar Alderete, for me, doesn't really get me going. It doesn't really excite me. I don't necessarily see the value. He's not particularly pacey. Don't think he's going to fit the system. And like I say, if Ange is a mentality-focused guy, can you make any assumptions? Can you make any at all? Can you ask any questions around why it is that by the age of 27 that he's been at 5 or 6 different clubs, never really spending too much time anywhere? What's going on there? Why is it that he is settled down now at Getafe? Late bloomer, or just, should we focus more on the past rather than the present? How about that? That's a better way of summarising it. Talking about past versus present, how about Jed Spence? Rumours out today that he is going back to Nottingham Forest. Brian King, Tottenham transfer guy on TalkSport, I think it was, said, Jed Spence can't get into the Tottenham team, and so he's likely to go away, probably to Nottingham Forest. They might take him back. And look, I don't really understand this one. It's one thing to not get into the first team when you're fully fit. It's another thing when you can't get in when we have so many injuries. And the fact that you have Destiny Udogie, who's not even in good form, in my opinion. He's been a real disappointment this year, who doesn't have any competition according to Ange, at least visibly, and yet you have both Richalison and Jed Spence who could play there that aren't getting any minutes. And on the right-hand side, you have Pedro Porro, who is going to burn out. He's playing every minute, basically, all the time, and it's a matter of time until that injury comes, or that just poor performances eventually seep in because you're just running yourself into the ground. And that you have a guy there in Jed Spence, who, I haven't seen this, but I heard from all you guys in the community at the start of the season when I was distracted, and you did see him, that he was doing well. So I don't really know what's going on. Is it a mentality thing that we heard about previously under Conte? Again, maybe Ange is thinking about that. Or is it just he really isn't good enough? And if so, then should we expect that departure if possible? Who's going to take the blame for that one? It's probably on Daniel Levy, isn't it? You see, guys, I do blame Daniel Levy. I'm very happy to give him criticism where I see fit. And if he did get involved and he did force this issue around Jed Spence and Conte didn't want him, and now there's Ange, then, and I don't believe he got any minutes either under the spells of the other 2 interim managers, then I think that Daniel Levy should wear that one and say, that's the reason why you shouldn't be doing football stuff, my man. I think that's it, guys. Alderete, and Gomes, David, Theo Hernandez, Jed Spence, and Zabarnyi. Look, the summary takeaway from me here, guys, is very simple. I believe that January, as we all know this, you all believe this too, is a very difficult window to do business. Budgets are never the same. Clubs don't want to lose their key players if they're in big parts of the season. A lot of the time, January is about covering for people that have become injured during the season that you didn't plan for. That's definitely going to be the case for us. If we had any intended acquisitions around maybe going after a Monster 6, then does that get put on the shelf in order to save a season? Does the fact that we might still be in all competitions by January, does that shape our transfer plans? Do we front load the risk of deadwood in the future by covering for players now in an effort to try to get a trophy? Or do we stick to the plan around whatever the transfer policies were and hope that the injuries figure themselves out? What do we do about this injury concern as a going concern? Do we have to figure out, is it the medical team that can't get these guys fit? Is it Ange's and the coach's training ground things? Or is it just bad luck? It's certainly it's certainly a variable. I'm just not sure where the accountability sits. Not everything sits within the club. Not everything sits at someone's feet. Sometimes it can just be bad luck. Acknowledge it. But there is a chance, and you guys can let me know how you feel about this, that this could be avoided in the future with some different decisions around who it is that's fixing them and why it is that they're getting injured in the first place. If it's training intensity, then dial it back. You're playing twice a week, and it's clearly having a negative impact. With regards to Zabarnyi, guys, I'm a big fan of his. I just think it's going to be difficult. And what do we do about Micky Van De Ven? Do we have to shake hands with the fact that we've got a guy that's amazing but is ever presently injured, and that will be a consistent theme throughout his career? Or do we hope that it can be a short-term thing and then not spend all the budget on someone like Zabarnyi and go again on someone like the left winger? But even in the left winger spot that everyone still thinks isn't solved, are we saying that because we haven't seen Hojbjerg? We haven't seen Heung Min and spit on that thing. I don't know really where we're at with that left wing spot. Obviously, Timo's a short-term thing. Obviously, Sonny's on the decline. I know a load of you want someone, or most of you want someone who's established to come in and take over that reins. But then what do we do with these 2 young players, both of whom, I'm not sure if Heung Min Yang was ever supposed to be ready for now, for the here and now. But with regards to Hojbjerg, that guy is a really good player, a real top talent. I really like him, and it's just a shame that he is injured and a long-term injury, and we haven't had a chance to see him yet. But do we have to adjust our transfer policy because of those absentees? It's a dilemma and something I need your help with figuring out. So let me know, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, bye-bye.